As we return, even just a little bit, to our true identity, the wholeness, what happens is that something shifts in what we notice inside as wholeness begins to return. What starts to be more possible is an attunement toward this inner movement that before wasn't trusted, needed to be silenced or managed or controlled. But as wholeness gives us permission to start to inhabit who we are again, remembering that identity remembered, not invented, returning to what always was, that something starts to feel like it moves, and in fact has always been in motion within us. This current that flows in a direction toward what is life-giving for us, what is purpose and meaning, what is good, what is true and honorable, what is meant for us to draw us toward life. In whole story living, that pull, that current, is the second principle of the whole story living framework called desire. Now, desire is a challenging word. We have been taught by our experiences, by the systems that we grew up in, by our families, and by our religion, and by society and culture that desire is dangerous, depending on the gendered experience that we have in our bodies. Those stories look different as well. For some of us, desire is temptation, and for others, desire is something we can't control. We have been taught that to need, to want, to long for, to yearn toward something is not only dangerous, but even sinful, or at the very least, definitely untrustworthy. Yet, whole story living calls us to that very next thing, which is if I am engaging the question of who am I, then the next question is, how do I know it? What moves me in that direction? And the answer to those questions are all about what it is that I require, I desire in my felt experiences of relationships, both within myself, with others, and with God. That there are certain things that speak connection to me, that speak life, that speak affirmation of who I am in a way that expands me out of the need to control it and into the permission, the space to move with it. Desire is one of those things that is a little challenging to describe because there are so many shoulds or mostly shouldn'ts around it that even asking the question, what does desire mean to me, brings up a lot. For me, it is impossible to separate what it is that I desire from my body because our bodies are the location where we experience all of this stuff. And I can't separate what I need, what I want, what I long for, what speaks connection and life to me without it being embodied. And that also means that I can't avoid engaging with the stories when both my desire and others' desires has been distorted, has been moving in a way that is not life-giving, that is towards harm. And to name and wrestle the experiences that I've had and likely you have had that have created harm, fear, shame, definitely mistrust, and definitely a felt need to control and manage it rather than inhabit and move with it. To experience what desire is, we must start from wholeness, meaning I am returning to remember who I am, and then that me has movement. They are inextricably linked together, which means who I am has a direction that I am meant to go. For many of us, we consider that purpose, and yet purpose is a result of. The movement is moving. I can move with it, and then my purpose is revealed. The movement isn't purpose, because then again, we get into the distortions of our protective self where as long as I'm moving, then I am performing my purpose, and that is not what desire is. So if we are to metaphorically look at what it is as a felt experience, it's like standing at the bank of a river and noticing that the river has a flow, it has a current that moves, whether or not I do anything about it. Now, interestingly enough, desire, if we look at it as that current, what we most often do with desire is try to control it. Our vigilance that we've experienced around our body and our emotions, particularly in relationships, translates into I need to redirect the flow into something safe and manageable, into something that doesn't overwhelm me, that won't knock me off my feet. And in doing so, the natural current of that flow gets harnessed into something that feels like it should keep us safe, but actually keeps us less safe. Because when we try to dam up the flow, that current turns to vigilance, the unguardedness of protecting ourselves from, which is the opposite of what it means to flow with the current of desire, which is to move with the current toward what brings us life. And this is the part where trust is really an interesting place to navigate, because can we trust that the inner movement of who we've always been actually moves us towards life? We have been taught so hard not to trust our gut, not to trust our body when it signals that somebody's not safe or a situation or relationship is not safe. We've been taught that we cannot trust our natural impulses. Ironically, the impulses that are not trustworthy are the ones that are birthed after we've been gifted with this internal, inner sacred compass that manifests itself in discernment and inner wisdom and a deep knowing that gets harnessed into untrustworthiness. And therefore, I have to silence it. I have to control it. I have to put governors around it because it's not trustworthy. And you can see how the externally proclaimed identities that we take on would then naturally lead to I'm going to tell you what you need, what you want, what you desire. I'm going to tell you that what you naturally desire isn't trustworthy because one is a natural outcome of the other. But as we start to reclaim even just a little bit the source of our identity as birthed from within, from the character and personality and breath that was given to us as a gift at creation, then naturally there is a movement that comes with it because when the breath of life is breathed into us, it doesn't stay still. Breath moves, wind moves. So the question of desire is about freeing it from the mechanisms of self-protection, which naturally arise when we have been hurt, when the place where we experience desires has been harmed, abused, assaulted, ridiculed, shamed, and what it means to come back to that current that's been moving underneath all of the structures of vigilance and control that we have used to try to stay safe. If wholeness is about remembering who we are again, then desire is about, and where does that lead me? What direction does that take me in? And the return to embodying desire again is about trust in that current as a direction toward life, towards what brings the most goodness and connection for me, what brings the best version of myself. If we are moving toward isolation and anger and all of the things that disconnect us from ourselves and from others and from God, then we are not flowing in desire any longer. Something else has happened to misshape that into mechanisms of self-protection that harm ourselves and others. The movement of desire that we can trust is always when it is toward that which brings us life. That can be as simple as the feel of dirt on my fingers when I plant flowers or seeds. Even the irritatingness of pulling weeds, of tending to that which I have planted, that brings me life. It brings joy and groundedness and a sense of purpose and a direction towards an outcome that is joy, that is peace, that is beauty. Right now, the question might be rolling around with you is, well, what is that? How do I know? And the answer always is your body will tell you. Your body always knows that which is life-giving, that which causes us to thrive rather than simply survive. The biggest obstacle to returning home to desire is that we all have mechanisms of a pseudo desire that are far more practiced. We know, for example, that vegging out on our phones every night before we go to bed does not give us good things. That is not life-giving, and yet we choose it because it's a habit. We know that there are certain things that we do to calm ourselves down, to make ourselves feel better when we are dysregulated, when we are hurt, that in the long run do not actually help us. And yet we choose them because they're far more practiced. Desire, reclaiming the movement of our identity towards what makes that identity thrive, is practice. It is about learning new habits based on paying attention to the signals that my body gives towards, yes, that. Ugh, no, not that. Towards understanding that anything that we try to control has automatically, by definition, stopped movement, and thereby we are no longer in desire, we are in control. And as we all know intellectually, there is no such thing as control. We try super hard at it, and yet we know there's not much we actually have control over. But as we start to embody the reclaiming of desire as a movement, then what we can start to imagine again for ourselves is that perhaps it starts by doing less, not more. By catching ourselves when we run off in a direction that we're really used to and asking ourselves, does my body actually feel better? Do I feel more safe? Do I feel more connected to who I really am? Or have I moved away from that true home in me? There's always the invitation to return home. When we remember who we are, then that returning makes space for us to follow the movement of desire towards what fertilizes and nurtures and sustains and tends that identity in us. That is lived out in purpose and calling and vocation. Yes, it is lived out in the roles that we play, such as parent, child, coworker, sibling, all of those things. And yet, those roles are the way that identity moves outward, not the way that identity is received externally. This movement is always an inside out expression. So, as we think about what desire might be inviting us to move toward, there is equally things that we would move away from. The current moves in a direction and we move with it, leaving some things behind. What are those things that might be keeping us stuck in what we've always done? And what are the things that might set us free to flow again, to feel the gift of a deep breath again, to look out and see what brings joy, beauty, imagination, creativity, fun, pleasure again? Because if we were not meant to experience these things, we would not have been gifted with desires in our heart. We would not have been gifted with the signals that tell us yes or no. The challenge is releasing the habit of the ones we listen to in order to reteach ourselves the ones we want to listen to, the unlearning of the old and the relearning of the new, which are actually the old. They came first, but it feels new because they've just not been chosen for so long. So, what would it take for you to think about the experience of when do I feel most alive? What is it that I participate in, that I do, that I experience, that even if it's physically exhausting, I am filled with just a deeper energy. I am filled, not depleted. I am tired, but not exhausted. I am excited to go back there again versus the, ugh, not again. Identity and direction go hand in hand. Wholeness naturally leads to desire. As we start to notice the movement again, let's follow it home.